Hello, I'm Anthony Brandt, and I'm here with Thomas Harris, author of 6 books, and this is part of a series we call Conversations. Tom is an old friend of mine. He's very famous for some of these books. You've all heard of Silence of the Lambs. You wrote it. Red Dragon, Black Sunday, Hannibal Rising, and now the new one, Cari Mora. Tom is, how can I say it? He's one of the kindest, most generous, finest gentlemen I've ever known in my life, and yet he writes some of the darkest books that exist in the American repository of books, let's put it that way. And I'm curious, Tom, how did somebody from a Mississippi farm background who grew up with, I'm assuming, not much going on in his life, come to write so dramatically about evil?
Well, Tony, the Deep South is kind of gothic anyway. I think they call some of the architecture steamboat gothic down there. And I guess you write about what you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I started working for a newspaper to, help pay for college while I was in college. And I became a police reporter. And you see everything.
This was in Waco?
This was in Waco, right.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. I got sort of interested in crime, and you meet every sort of person on earth. And there's a tradition of storytelling in the South. You sit on the front porch. I grew up before television, and so you sit on the front porch and you listen to people tell stories to amuse each other. And it's a skill that is a coveted skill down there, and somebody can tell a story. This doesn't apply to darkness, but I think I had a small epiphany when I was about, 9 years old, going to a country school. We had a cafeteria, and I earned my lunch by bussing tables.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody would finish eating, I would bus, and by the time I got through, lunch was over. There was no time to go to the playground. So one day, I was gobbling down my lunch to get through and start bussing, and I was telling a story to 3 of my friends at the table. It was a thing about a submarine, and they were in the South Pacific, and the depth charges were falling on them, and the water was up to here inside the sub. And I said, hey, look, I gotta go bust these tables. And they said, well, tell us the rest. And I said, I gotta work, listen. He said, if we help you, will you tell us the rest? And I said, well, sure, 2 or 3 guys in there, we all busting tables. I had time to go outside and play before class came back in. And I think a dim little light went on in my brain about that. It worked about 3 or 4 times. But what I found out, the water had better be up to here when you need help busing, or everybody's gone.
Yeah, up to here is no good.
Up to here is no good. It's got to be.
So you found out something about suspense.
I think so. That taught me something.
Yeah. But then you went to New York. You, as I remember, you sold a story to Argosy magazine, is that right?
Yeah. I was a reporter at the News Tribune in Waco, and the wages were very, very low, and I was feeding a baby
Right.
So Argosy called up, and they asked me to go down to. I'd sent them some letters trying to sell them something, you know. So they called me up and they sent me down to Monterey, to the Monterey State Prison, to interview some people. And they paid like, you know, a couple of $100.
Right.
Boy, you know.
Right. In those
So
days.
that buys a lot of baby food.
Right.
So I sold them several things, and I did one for Cycle World. I was a motorcycle person then, and I got 3 or 4 sales out of Argosy. The Gonzalez Valenzuela sisters trial in San Francisco del Rincon, and a couple of things. So Milt Macklin, who was the editor of Argosy, called me up and he said, "Why don't you come up here?" He said, "You could compete up here. Why don't you come on up?" And whoa. So I did. Like to starve to death. The first year in New York, I made $1,700.
I've been there. I know what that's like.
You know what that's like, yeah. So I had to have a job.
Yeah.
And I went to the AP, and thank God, got assigned to Manhattan.
Right.
You know. And you know, it was cops and $50 stick-ups and stuff for a long time. And,
Right. But you must have learned from that.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
you see
watch
human
the
nature
cops.
at its worst.
At its worst.
Yeah.
There was a lot of civil unrest in New York. This was
60s?
67, 68.
Yeah.
And we combed a good bit of glass out of our hair, you know, and it was exciting, and got tear gassed up at Columbia.
Did you?
Oh God, yes.
That's miserable.
It's just awful. So here came the thing. 3 years of that, and you know, you can last as a journalist as long as your legs last. And I was wanting to do something else. Well, the guys at Newsday wrote, 3 of them now, wrote "Naked Came the Stranger."
I remember it well. I never read it, but I remember it. And they made a fortune, didn't they?
Sure. And not only that, they came back with the sequel, "Naked Came the Stranger Again."
That's simple.
So I was sitting there with Dick Riley and Sam Maul, two of my fellow reporters. Said, "Those guys do that. We can do that." So it was about the time of the Munich Olympics, you know, and the terrible tragedy there. It suggested something. And so we started out working on Black Sunday.
Whose idea was it? Do you remember?
Yes.
Yours. Okay.
So,
I suspected as much.
but we all, you know, we all started working on it. And then circumstances required me to leave New York because of illness in my family. And I was not going to be at the AP, so I wrote it. And they did a lot of good research.
But they didn't contribute to the writing at all, is that right?
In the first couple of chapters, we all did chapters.
So you passed it back and forth?
We
Sort of.
passed it around for the first chapter or 2, and then I redid the whole thing pretty much. But they did a lot of research. I got to fly the blimp.
You flew
I
a blimp?
flew the blimp
Oh my God.
out at Hicksville. The Goodyear company was having one of their host days, you know,
Right.
and they let me fly that baby. It's a lot of work.
Did they know what the plot of the book was?
No.
That's probably a good thing.
Probably was. When they shot it, when they shot the movie, I was very surprised that Goodyear said, "Okay, you know, you can use our blimp." I think that we agreed that nobody would get shot through a Goodyear logo,
Right.
you know. And it was clear that the personnel were hired from an outside agency. It was clear that they were not Goodyear employees who were doing the bad stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So we got through with it, and I had a wonderful editor named Harvey Ginsberg.
Well, he's famous, yeah.
Yeah, he was terrific. And he called me up in Mississippi. I was down there. And he told me that it was going to be on the Times bestseller list.
Wow.
And whoa, I don't think I've ever been happier.
Wow, that's a big statement.
Yeah. My father and I were sitting together outside in the yard. I heard the phone ring, and I went in there and I picked it up, and Harvey told me. And I came back out, and we went over to Mark's and bought a brand new pickup truck. It was a Ranchero. It's great.
Yes.
My father.
Well, I've heard of people who were rescued that way from, and they went to Paris. The first thing they could possibly do was, you know, go to the bank and go to Paris.
Go to Paris, yeah.
What happened to the pickup truck?
He drove it for maybe 5 or 6 more years, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It was a Ranchero, a Ford Ranchero.
Well, you said something in, you did a preface for the paperback edition of one of the books, and I forget which one it was. Could have been Silence, could have been Red Dragon. But you talked about being in the farm field in Mississippi and meeting Dr. Lecter. Do you remember that?
What had happened was when I went to the Nuevo Leon State Prison in Monterey, I encountered a doctor there. The person I was interviewing, Dyke Simmons, had been shot in the prison by a guard whom he had paid to escape, and then the guard just shot him, kept the money. This doctor saved him. And the warden was showing me around, and he showed me to the doctor's office, and it was a small office set in a cell. And the doctor was treating poor people for free who would come into the prison. And I talked to him about Dyke Simmons and about his mentality and stuff. And this man was very, very smart, and he had a sort of gravity about him. Very courteous, very quick. So as we were walking out, I said, does the doctor come here and practice every day? And the warden said, you don't know who that is? That's the werewolf of Nuevo Leon.
Oh, boy.
You know, and he had, so anyway, years later, in Rich, Mississippi, I was working in a little shotgun house out in the middle of a cotton field. And the character came along. I was doing Red Dragon. And Will Graham, the detective, was trying to figure out who was doing the bad stuff. And he needed to talk to somebody about it. And I guess I remember talking about Dyke Simmons with the doctor in the Nuevo Leon State Prison. And I won't say he was the model for Hannibal Lecter, but when Hannibal Lecter came along, I could recognize him because of the doctor.
Yeah, okay. Well, Hannibal Lecter is like one of the great icons now of American culture. He appears in crossword puzzles. Somebody's always comparing a character in another book to Hannibal Lecter, including in your books, because, you know, where's Hannibal?
Yeah.
And, you know, I've read them all, and I've come to like him. I know that's a weird statement to make, but I have this. First of all, he only kills the rude.
That's right.
He has no friends.
No.
Not a single one. He's completely self-contained, and he has perfect tastes in food and wine and you name it. He knows all about that stuff. And at the same time, in the Hannibal book, just that title, Hannibal, he's in Italy and he's giving lectures at the, what's that palace?
At the Palazzo Vecchio.
Palazzo Vecchio, exactly. And a detective comes along. I just saw this last night on TV. And a detective who has figured out who he is tries to capture him. And he kills him in the same way that the chief conspirator in the Pazzi conspiracy from 4 or 5 centuries before gets killed.
Out the same window.
Same window, hanging from the same window, he disembowels him. And I thought, anybody, well, of course, you knew the story, obviously, because you wrote it, but I thought any guy who can do that so elegantly, even if it's a horrible murder, just appealed to me. I don't know if there's something peculiar about myself, but nevertheless, I just thought, what a character, this is incredible. And I don't know, I didn't fall in love with him, but I was sorry to see him go in a way.
Well, we left him dancing on the terrace.
In Argentina, was it?
Yeah, who's dancing
With Clarice.
Starling. Yeah.
And where did she come from? You have a gift for doing amazingly strong women.
That's in Black Sunday, I had Dahlia Iyad, who, even though she was a terrorist, she was a distinct character. And I liked working with her. So after Red Dragon, I wanted to try to do a woman investigator. And I met some terrific ones at Quantico.
Right.
They were amazing women. And so I thought, okay, what do I know? And during this research trip I made to Quantico and to Washington and working in the Smithsonian and stuff, at that time there was a plague of starlings in Washington.
Really?
Oh, they were all around the White House. They were soiling everything, and they were just great flocks of them, and they were playing different sounds around the White House to try to scare them off. And the FBI building, looks like a cage. It looks like a concrete cage. They were in every opening in the front of the building. So when you walked out, what did they do? They flew. And when they flew, it rained. Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know if that's where her name came from, but they were certainly everywhere. And
they're a tough little bird.
Yeah, they sure are.
I don't particularly like them, but they're tough little
They
birds.
survive.
Yes. And Clarice, that's an unusual name. I'm curious about where you get your names. It's
There was a woman in the soaps at that time who had a sort of an Appalachian sort of accent that was really good, and it was her natural accent, and her name was Clarice, and maybe that's where, I don't know.
Well, I knew a writer who would tour cemeteries to look for names.
Look for names, yeah.
Yeah, but obviously you don't do that.
Phone book works.
Yeah.
You try several, and it's funny how in the evolution of a character, if you have some new ones, new characters, the first couple of days, you can feel like a window dresser. You're setting mannequins around, And then if you're lucky, and this is the best sign in the world, if they quit cooperating with you. If they don't want to do the stuff that we really need to do this.
Yeah.
Nope. So the worst mistake you can make is to make a character do something he doesn't want to.
Right.
And the best thing you can do is sit back and let her rip, let them do what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
You have to in the end.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Do you know Harris Yulin, the actor?
I'm not clear. Yes,
anyway,
I know his name, certainly.
Yeah, he's a friend of ours, and he did Frost Nixon here about a year ago, and he was Nixon. And there were a lot of lines, and Harris is not a young man, he's my age, and I thought, how do you remember all those lines? And how do you focus in that way every night? He said, after a while, the president took over.
Oh ho. Mm-hmm.
So that you live in the character, and then the character has a life of its own, and it takes over. And that's clearly the case that you're dealing with when you write, is that once you create somebody, they take on a life of their own.
They do.
And a mind of their own. And that's fascinating.
Well, it's always a surprise to me that I can do it,
Yeah.
It's a surprise to me. And I hope to be surprised again,
Well, I'm sure you will be. Silence. I think of Silence as probably your best book. Other people disagree with me. Some people think Red Dragon. I actually like them all. I even like Hannibal Rising, which
puts you in the minority.
Yes.
I did that for myself as much as anything.
Yeah, I know. And yet this new book, Cari Mora, is so different. I think you must have spent a long time thinking about that one.
Well, it's been quite a bit of time between my last novel and this one. I didn't realize how long it had been. Miami had a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
This is kind of a book about Miami. It's a very strong flavor. I say in the acknowledgments that Miami is savory and beautiful. It's an intensely American city.
Full of immigrants, by the way.
Largely built and maintained by people who came from someplace else,
Yeah.
often on foot.
And Cari is another very strong woman.
Yeah, who has looked into the problem of child soldiers is the Quakers.
Really?
The Quaker United Nations office sent people all over the world talking to child soldiers in Africa, in South America. And they have a series of, they published interviews in a publication called Voices of Girl Child Soldiers.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and you can read their reminiscences in there and whatever happened to them, and it's chilling. And so Cari Mora is a product of that, and I know a lot of Colombians, and everything, I would say, everything in that book has happened. It's always been my contention that you don't have to make anything up.
Well, you have to put it together.
Try to put some order, yeah.
Well, we live next to a Colombian refugee who, as a young man, he was just out of college, and his parents had some money, and the Colombian guerrillas came to his father and said, we're going to kidnap your son unless you pay us tribute every month. It's like paying rent. And so his father wisely immediately sent him to the United States. And he's now married to an American wife. He has a child who's bilingual, very, very nice man. But he was saved from a really horrible fate, because if they take you, they're going to make you kill people.
Yeah.
And there's a wonderful scene in this book where Cari, who's a captive or a participant against her will, kills the captain because he's shooting under a house trying to kill a child. And she shoots him in the back of the head, and then she disposes of the body. So she knows all about that world, all about that level of crime, and the drug trade and everything else about it. It's a fascinating book.
It was pretty hard to do, and the reminiscences, the real reminiscences of these kids, it's just incredible to read. There's a person who works in the neighborhood of my office in Miami from Honduras, and his cousin, 23, was found in Honduras in the Signature 13 pieces about 3 weeks ago. We got crossways with. So that's the tragedy of cutting back on help for Honduras and for the three triangles, the Northern Triangle. Because if we could help them stay at home, they wouldn't have to make that terrible long trek up here.
Well, I just ran across the movie Hannibal last night by accident. I said, oh, I better watch the rest of this. And I remember it doesn't end, the movie doesn't end the way the book ends. And I felt like there had been a kind of betrayal of the book. I don't know how you feel about it, but I would go crazy.
It's hard to see that. If you don't have final cut in a movie, you don't have anything. I mean, all the titles in the world are not going to help you if you don't have final cut. And I grieved about that. I think that the movie makers did not trust the audience to understand the ending.
Really?
I'm sorry about that.
I thought it was, in the book, it seemed inevitable.
Yes.
Because he had worked so hard to get her to see the actual life that she was involved in and the ideals that she held and how they were betrayed by the very organization she was loyal to.
There was a professor at the New School did a piece about this. He described how Hannibal managed to affect make the transference of Starling's love for her father and respect for her father. He could transfer some of that to himself, which he did, and that's why they wound up dancing on the patio, you know. But I think that, well, I know that the movie makers just didn't think that would fly, and there's nothing you can do.
That sucks.
Yeah.
That really sucks.
Anyway, maybe the movie enjoyed considerable success, and maybe they'll film it again. I don't know. They did
Well, they
Red
did
Dragon twice.
Twice, right. I don't think I saw the second version.
Yeah.
But first they did it as Manhunter,
Manhunter, that's right.
and that was taken over by the director. You could tell that he had his own vision of how this should work.
Michael Mann did that.
Yeah, well,
Anyway, you can't. Hemingway said that what you should do is take your book to the California state line, wait till they throw you the money, then you throw them the book, and you turn around and drive home just as fast as you can go. That's not bad advice.
Let me ask you another question. What do you read? What is your reading pleasure for the most part?
I don't read nearly as much as I used to, and I think maybe I blame vision for that part of it. But I like to read. I like to read journals. I like to read. I like to read diaries. I've got Peeps, of course, and I was reading Robert Louis Stevenson's journals are fascinating, and I got the whole thing. I got all of them, 10
volumes?
volumes.
Holy cow!
From Caneos.
Really?
Yeah, they had them in there in red leather.
That's cool.
Yeah, and it's all his theories about prosody, and he's right about just everything in the world.
Did you ever read Keats's letters?
I have read some of Keats's letters, but not all yet. I've got them in Miami, and I want to read that.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I totally love Keats.
Yeah.
But the letters are incredible.
As soon as I get back to Miami, I'm gonna take those up again.
Yeah. Do you read much poetry?
I do.
You're alone in the world, realize.
Yeah. I as you know, I'm a fan of Larkin. Lawrence Spingarn. I was reading this morning The Lenient Beast. When I said that mercy stood within the border of the wood, I meant the ravening beast with claws and bloody, quick dispatching jaws.
Okay. We know who that is, right?
I guess we do. Yeah, I like to read poetry. I think it's good for you.
And you read journals? You mean scientific journals, criminal journals, or
no? Just memoirs and stuff like, for instance, Dorothy Wordsworth's trip to Milan with her brother to see The Last Supper.
Oh.
Yeah, when Napoleon had Milan occupied, and they were afraid that Napoleon's soldiers would vandalize The Last Supper. So they went out to that convent where it is. And they found it perfectly intact, except there was one bullet hole in the sky, and the monks had cut a door in it so they could hand out food from the galley out into the dining room.
Oh my God.
I think you can still see where the door was.
Oh, I've never seen it. I didn't realize.
Yeah.
Well, you spent some time in Italy.
Yes.
I mean, we both have. It's a place that you fall in love with.
You wrote a book about Rome.
I did. Nobody wants to publish it, but it's there.
Oh, well.
And it's just, it's good to get out in the world.
Yes, it is, and Italy's good for you.
Yeah, it really is.
You feel that indigenous eye, that design eye over there in little things.
Turns up everywhere. Well, let me see if I have any more questions that I really need to ask you. Homicide School. I wanted to know about Homicide School.
Well, training division of the Miami Police Department used to have about twice a year homicide schools. They'd have homicide investigation, and then they'd have advanced. And Sergeant David Rivers there wrote the curriculum for it, and he taught there as well, and was kind enough to invite me. So I went 6 times, I think.
6 times?
Yeah.
Wow.
It was wonderful. And Henry Lee, the police commissioner of Connecticut, used to come down and lecture, and experts from all over the country. And to be a member of the class, you had to be a working detective, except for me. And it was great. Just listening to the casual conversation was as good as the classes. They had, usually they'd do crime scene, they'd do blood spatter and DNA, interrogation. And it was.
So you could sit in on all these classes?
Yeah.
Well, that sounds interesting. I would like that. That would.
Yeah. Well, next time they have it, I'll let you know.
I'm not going to come down for that. You know that.
You might.
I might. That's true. Anything's possible. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
Yes. One thing. Very often, I'm asked, kids ask me, you know, how do you learn how to do it? And I believe that a lot more people could write than do. But there are a couple of things that are really useful that it might take you a long time to find for yourself. But Ezra Pound's theory of the mot juste, the exact word, is really a good exercise. And the discipline of getting rid of as many modifiers as you can.
Right.
Because you can get, you know very well, you can get rid of a lot of adjectives by choosing a better noun or a better verb.
That's absolutely true.
That's a good thing. I think Stephen King has written a very good book on the craft.
I have that book, but I haven't read it yet.
It's good. And Forster's aspects of the novel. C.S. Forester's The Hornblower Companion.
Well, you recommended Hornblower to me once as something worth reading. I never got around to it. I could never find any Hornblower books, believe it or not, even in a used bookstore. But I remember that.
Yeah, he is absolutely great at exposition, at explaining the mechanics of a ship or whatever else it is you need to understand before the gun starts shooting and the action starts. Hemingway said that Kidnapped was where you first find the example of getting everything away before the action starts. And then the sentence that starts the big fight in the roundhouse of this ship says, "It came with a rush when it did." And you've explained everything.
Right.
So you don't have to stop. You don't have to lose momentum.
Yeah. That's wise.
Yeah. I think it's useful sometimes it's useful to imagine an audience sitting in your office, people whose intelligence you respect, and you're trying to hold their attention, or you want to keep them engaged. It's useful.
Well, of course, you did that when you were a newspaper man. You sat in an office and a whole bunch of people are sitting around.
Yeah.
They're not watching you, but nevertheless, they're there. You can hear them talking to each other. You know that you have to create a little island of sanity inside your own space.
That's very true.
and keep that out, but you can't help but be aware of it at the same time.
Yeah, you can work amid all this racket. When I left journalism, I found though that the rhythm of the machine, the teleprinter, news offices were loud back then.
Yeah.
The teleprinter and all that, those rhythms just get into your system until comma police said is just a feeling in your lower arms. So trying to do this other thing, I wanted to try to get rid of the machine rhythms. And so I went to the hardware store and I bought some carpenter's pencils. And I got some tablets, school tablets with the dotted line. You go above the dotted line for the capitals. You know, it's rough paper and it's hard to write on. But a carpenter's pencil at that big around is the same scale to your hand as a pencil was in the 4th grade.
Right, okay.
So you get rid of an enormous amount of stuff just changing the tools.
So you don't necessarily work on a computer?
I do a lot. I do a lot, Tony. I've gotten to do it more and more. I graduated from the carpenter's pencils to finally to ballpoints and legal pads, and I still do the hard stuff that way.
Yeah, I do something like that myself. I have an infinite number of notebooks at home. This is an example. And I write in those, even though the pages are too small, but it somehow suits something that I'm thinking about. Often it's just ideas, but I lose track of them because I have too many notebooks.
Too many notebooks.
And I don't know what's in what. But that's okay too, because you go back and you look through the notebooks and you find a lot of stuff that you had forgotten that you had written and that could be useful. And anyway.
Do you ever take notes in the middle of the night? Do you ever?
No, I sleep really well.
Good.
I only have to get up when I have to pee.
Yeah.
You mentioned Ezra Pound. There's a line of his that I've never forgotten. And it was read in college by a professor who was teaching poetry. In the gloom, the gold gathers the light against it. Now that's a line.
Wow. Yeah, it is.
I wish I'd written it.
Yeah, me too. He's dead. Maybe I steal it. No, that is great. Yeah.
In the gloom, the gold gathers the light against it. Well, I don't have any more questions. I don't know if you have anything more to say, but
that about covers it for me.
Thank you for that. That covers it?
Yeah.
Well, okay.
Enjoyed our talk.
So did I, very, very much. Folks, that's it. That's the end of a conversation with Tom Harris, the fabulous author of our time when it comes to crime, terror, and the darkness of life. Thanks for watching.